It's really about showcasing some of the latest in tech, the latest in decarbonisation initiatives that any business perhaps would want to be educated about and perhaps be able to implement within their business structure. So welcome to you all. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get into our guest speakers today. If you do need to use the bathroom, they're located outside on the right-hand side on the same level. Our emergency exits are the same way that you came into the building. And this session is designed to run until around about 12 o'clock. However, we have given ourselves an extra half an hour in our Q&A session at the end with our panels. So we've got lots of time. If you've got questions, if you could please hold off for those questions until the end of the session, it would be much appreciated. For those of you who are online, we are working with our tech issue at the moment, but you will have the opportunity to ask questions yourself, even though you're not in the room. So please, there is a chat box on the YouTube platform that you can actually enter your questions. We'll be checking those questions through the morning and we'll be posing those questions to the panel at the end. So if you do know of a friend who's joining us via live stream, it may be worthwhile sending them a quick text message perhaps to say, hold on there, don't log off, we're working on the sound. And it'll be on shortly. Also, I'd like to do a welcome to country. Whitsunday Regional Council acknowledges the traditional owners of this land and pay our respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders living in our community today, for they hold the memories, the traditions and the cultures of their people. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to actually invite Olivia Broadhurst to come up here to chat about the hub, about some of the initiatives, one in particular, the Whitsunday Healthy Heart Project, which is close to my heart as I'm working on that project quite closely. She'll be covering what it's all about, what the hub's up to, and why we've brought these special guest speakers to the region today. So if you could please welcome Olivia. Thanks, Olivia.
All right, it's great to see everyone here. There's some familiar faces and some new faces, so that's really exciting to see that all the effort that we're putting into trying to build this collaboration is really starting to build momentum and start to really spark that interest and cross-collaboration and pollination of ideas in the region, really. So I wanted to give a really quick update from the hub. I don't want to take up much time, so I want to get into the meaty stuff of the day. But just for those that aren't that familiar with the Climate Hub, the Climate Change Innovation Hub is an initiative of Whitsunday Regional Council. It was formed in 2018. It is a little bit different to council standard operations in that we also report to an advisory panel made up of a selection of experts. So experts ranging from the insurance sector, finance, legal, climate adaptation, etc. So I have an amazing panel that I can go to with questions and ask for advice. So they guide the advisory panel, they guide the Climate Hub. The Climate Hub is part of Council's organisational structure. So that is really one of our strengths, is that we look to fill knowledge gaps for Council to help the region become more resilient and adapt to climate change. But we tap into research organisations, and then we really have the ability to try and make sure that the research is really practical and can be rolled out on the ground. So the researchers see that as an advantage to working with the Climate Hub, and vice versa, Council can see that advantage coming through to really underpin what they're doing with really factual science, especially with the changing climate. The mission of the Climate Hub is to build the resilience of the Whitsundays and communities everywhere to climate change. So we look to run projects locally for local benefit, but also to share our knowledge and engage quite widely. So there's a lot that we can learn from other regions through those collaborations as well. And we always are looking to upscale and kind of and learn from each other. So it's really is kind of an action collaboration. And we are looking to try and share everything we're doing. That's why one of the key things from today's event was to make sure that we're filming and we're making it available to other people as well, because we're all facing similar issues up and down the Queensland coast and with decarbonising. So I wouldn't be the coordinator of the Climate Hub without giving you a little update on climate change. So I've put a little graph here, and you can see from 1750, from the start of the Industrial Revolution, you can see how carbon emissions have gone up. When I say carbon emissions, everything's kind of turned into a carbon dioxide equivalent emission, but it could be methane, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide and other gases. So you can see there that the increase is really going up quite steep there at the edge of that curve. The latest update from the global atmospheric carbon dioxide emissions is that we're at 414 parts per million. So it was 280 in 1750. So it's ramping up very quickly. The change that we're seeing in the environment, average temperatures around the world have already increased about 1 degree, and everyone would have heard that we're trying to cap it at 1.5, maybe 2, to really curb climate change and protect the environment. So we're already seeing a lot of a global average temperature change of about 1 degree. Sea levels are rising around 1 centimetre a year. We're predicted here to have 80 centimetres to 1.2 metres of sea level rise by 2100. So we're planning for that at the moment within council. Rainfall is changing in seasonality. Rain is coming all at once. Our cyclones are coming less frequently but more intensely. So we've had Cyclone Debbie 5 years ago now. So, you know, that was a really big unprecedented event. So we're likely to see more of those style events. And obviously with sea level rise, we're getting more risk of erosion, coastal erosion, flooding, etc. And ocean acidification as well has already increased quite a lot. So it's quite a small scale, but the oceans are already acidifying. Cold waters are more affected by ocean acidification than warm waters. So areas that are further to the south are already starting to experience shelled organisms starting to deteriorate because of increased acidity in the water. All right, so this is why it matters. This is the what will happen at 1.5 degrees, what will happen at 2 degrees, and what's the difference between the two. So you can see here, one really big one for us is this one here with the coral reefs. With 1.5 degrees of warming, we're expecting to see a 70 to 90% decline in coral reefs, and with 2 degrees, we're up at 99%. So obviously there's a lot of other things that are affecting the reef, so it's changing the biodiversity of the reef and which species can survive, etc. as well. So we're starting to see all those changes coming through, and with coral bleaching, etc. also impacting the reef. At the moment we are obviously on a high emissions trajectory. We've just had the COP26 happen in Glasgow, and leaders around the world were discussing plans to try and decarbonise. So there has been some good things come out of that meeting, but obviously it all needs to come into play now, and they actually need to take those actions that they've committed to. Climate change is the number one biggest threat to the reef. That's why our tourism industry is very, very, very much wanting to do everything that they can to make sure that they are decarbonising to protect the reef. And our council is also committed to reducing carbon emissions, and council has committed to carbon neutral by 2050 and is currently planning how they're going to achieve that. The Whitsunday Healthy Heart project is the project that is leading the work with the tourism sector, and it's also looking to achieve a sustainable destination accreditation. This is a project funded by the Great Barrier Reef Foundation and Whitsunday Council together. Through the project, we're looking to engage with 30 operators every year, so 30 in year 1, 60 in year 2, 90 in year 3, etc., for a 4 years time span, and looking at engaging with operators, including marinas, island resorts, and people actually out taking people on boats and tours to help them to understand their carbon footprint, measure it, set some targets, and then decarbonise. So this is one of the workshops that will help them to understand how that can be achieved. Sometimes things like fuel it's a big emissions, but it's a really hard one to address because that's your high cost piece of equipment that most people have invested in for quite a long time span. So That's why we wanted to start to bring this information into the region, share what other people are doing around the world, and start to have that conversations about how we can uptake more future fuels and greener engines in the future. All right, so we have started the project in March this year, and so far we have 22 Healthy Heart Reef partners engaged in the project. So we were aiming for 30 in year one, so there's still space for another 8 to be engaged. And we have got some really incredible partnerships happening now. We're starting to write some case studies about what people are doing so that we can share information within the group. And we have started noticing a lot of collaboration increasing between different people sharing how they've managed to overcome different barriers. So the project is only in its early days, and we will be looking to try and keep ramping that project up and sharing more information as we go. So without further ado, though, I think that's the end of my presentation. Is there...
No sound at the moment as well.
Pardon?
There's no sound.
Okay, that's okay. I don't have any sound. That's my last slide. All right, well, we will move to our first presentation slot, I believe now. So we have Frank. We have Frank Hobson. Frank, do you want to come up? We have Frank Hobson joining us from Ricochet Yachting. He is the director of Ricochet Yachting, and him and his team are providing Hamilton Island and the Whitsundays with premier luxury yacht experiences. Frank has spent his whole life on or under the ocean. His professional yachting career has spanned 25 years, travelling the globe as a master on some of the world's most prestigious and innovative super yachts. Frank has spent several years in command of different billionaires' yachts, including Richard Branson's private yacht, Necker Belle. From his beginning as a fifth-generation commercial fisherman in the Bass Strait of Australia to running super yachts throughout the Caribbean, Mediterranean and Pacific, Frank has retained his professionalism and continues to ensure a high standard of excellence in the pursuit for a zero-emissions marine tourism vessel. So I'm just going to pass over to Frank.
Thank you, Olivia.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you to Lee and Olivia in organising this event. It's a fantastic platform to talk about renewable energy, and in particular zero emissions in the tourism industry, and that's what we would like to talk about, or I would like to talk about today. Now, forgive me, when I'm normally addressing an audience of this size, it's for a safety briefing, so if I break out into a life jacket demonstration or give you directions on how to use a marine toilet, forgive me. It's just force of habit. So, hydrogen, what can it do for us in the tourism industry? How powerful is it? Renewable hydrogen in particular offers a fuel source that is zero emissions. So when we make hydrogen or green hydrogen, it's using renewable energy, and then we use it leaving a zero carbon footprint. So that's very important. Are we able, Lee, to play the first little vid?
We can play the vid, but there'll be no sound.
Yeah, we can play the first vid. It doesn't require sound, just the first part of it, the first...
Can you keep on talking, Frank? Thank you.
Or we can move to the vessel straight away. Should we do that and go to the website if you want to check out your audio, because it doesn't require any actual audio. So H2 Rendezvous is our company and our new design for the first zero emissions hydrogen fueled vessel or tourism vessel. And it's been in development for over 4 years. So five years ago we had the option to expand our business and to move into a larger vessel. Our current vessel is a sailing boat, and to move into a larger vessel which was going to be obviously powered at that stage by diesel engines. And when I thought about it, I just couldn't do it. It just wasn't the future. The fact that I was going to deliver 650 tonnes of carbon dioxide into the environment every year through this venture, it just didn't sit right with me. So my naval architect and I, we started working on what are the possible alternatives, and we were looking at batteries. You know, that was, we thought it was a viable option, but we soon found out very quickly that the amount of batteries we require for a boat to go out to the reef and back, well, the boat would have sunk at the dock. okay? And even though with the technology advances in battery storage and capability, batteries will never be that that large storage capacity for vessels running out that amount of horsepower out to the reef and back. So the next alternative we looked at was hydrogen, and the hydrogen fuel cell actually provides the basis to provide those kilowatts that we need, okay? And we can talk a little bit more about the vessel as soon as we go. So the H2 Rendezvous Project is a world first, a Great Barrier Reef tourism vessel that is stylish and luxurious in every detail and powered by 100% clean, green, renewable energy produced locally in the Whitsundays. And that's an important part too of this whole project. It's about doing everything locally. So our sunshine that's out there shining, not so much today, but 90% of the time on Queensland can be turned into hydrogen, okay? And Aaron will talk more about that in the next presentation about how that's going to happen and the different kind of industries it's going to bring into the production of hydrogen. So there's one shot of Rendezvous there. Are we able just to scroll up at all, guys, so I can just check out what I'm talking about? Excellent. And it's going to offer a unique experience. So you step aboard, find your sunbed and relax. The dock lines are dropped and the vessel leaves its berth in total silence. No rumbling of combustion engines, no sign of smoke, just the sound of the sleek hulls cutting through the water. This tour will be a completely unique experience and one that will be remembered for a lifetime. Just imagine that, you know, when you're first going aboard this vessel that makes no noise and takes you out to the reef amongst the islands. Rendezvous will be the first vessel of its kind in the future of marine tourism. Queensland has the opportunity to host the first hydrogen-powered zero-emission renewable energy tourism vessel. And that's about starting a brand. Okay, that's about promoting our area as a green tourism hub. Okay, and other operators joining us and transitioning their vessels over to hydrogen fuel cells and combinations of hybrid battery fuel cell smaller vessels. And Leif from Evoy Outboards will talk a little bit more about that in the last presentation. The installation of the first hydrogen production and storage and delivery facility in the Whitsunday region and others in central Queensland with the construction of the first hydrogen-powered commercial marine tourism vessel is a critical step in Queensland's transition to renewable energy. And I'm excited to hear from Aaron in the next presentation about how we're going to produce hydrogen here in the Whitsundays. Are we able to scroll down a little bit, please? Guys, just down to the next picture and the next set of information. You might have to zoom out a little bit because the information's on the side. Okay, this will do. So zero emissions. One of the key components of the success of H2 Rendezvous project is the reliable, sustainable access to green hydrogen. It's critical that multiple independent memorandums of understanding concerning supply and purchase agreements with local multifaceted hydrogen production companies are established to ensure a consistent daily supply. So you know where the diesel is. You can come down here and get your diesel here. It's readily available and it's readily available everywhere. So if this is going to be a success, it's really important that new operators or operators using hydrogen have that supply. And a part of our program is actually to not just offer hydrogen for us to use, but for other operators in the Whitsundays. So, and it's just not limited to buses, to boats either. It's to buses and cars also. So we're going to our first phase of our program is actually to have a hydrogen tube trailer and refueler. So this tube trailer will go out to places like Aaron's development out there, his hydrogen facility and other facilities around the central Queensland, and fill up with hydrogen and then deliver it basically where it's needed. So if I need it at Shute Harbour, you can come to Shute Harbour and I can refuel. If a bus needs it out at the airport, it can refuel. And if a vessel here requires hydrogen, it can refuel. So it's a portable storage, transport and refueling device, and that's quite key in the initial stages of offering hydrogen to this region. Are we able to scroll down a little bit or go to, where are we? Okay, excellent, fantastic. An ocean of opportunity. For Queensland tourism businesses and community, climate change is both a risk and an opportunity too big to ignore. The increasing costs of extreme weather events, changes in natural resources, and the transition towards a decarbonised global economy are highly relevant for tourism. A strategic plan underpins ambitious actions and will support Queensland's tourism industry to respond to climate risks and opportunities. Against the background of a wider Queensland policy framework on climate change, building a resistant tourism industry, and it was made clear in the Queensland's Tourism and Climate Change Response Plan, provides a roadmap for the tourism industry to respond proactively to climate change and lead the way as a steward for the environment and a key contributor to the community wellbeing. All right, we might just go to the second page, if we go up to the top, and then move to the second page of the web page. There we go. We'll go to About, and we'll just scroll down a little bit down to the project details. Excellent, thank you. All right, so we'll just scroll down to this point just here, please, because that's already been covered. There are two separate components to the Rendezvous Project, and as I spoke about before, the first phase will have that 400 kilogram refueler, and that'll travel to where the hydrogen is required. And the second, of course, is the construction of a purpose-built hydrogen-powered commercial tourism vessel. And the cost of this construction and refueler, and basically any first step towards getting into renewable vessels and buses, is going to require co-contribution from government, and that's extremely important, and Queensland has been on the front foot of this, and we're hopefully to see the Commonwealth do the same and be able to help companies like myself to be able to bring this technology to fruition and into action, because obviously the cost of a diesel vessel compared to a fuel cell vessel in the initial stages is a very big price difference, and that cost is prohibitive, and that's why we haven't seen these vessels out there just yet, and also the fact that the technology is only starting to catch up to us now to allow this to happen. So the vessel itself, Rendezvous, will be powered by hydrogen fuel cells. The vessel will cater up to 60 guests and offer high-speed Whitsunday Island transfer service and marine tourism operation, including snorkelling on the Great Barrier Reef. Rendezvous will travel at speeds of 24 knots. Can we able to go back to? Thank you. And it's been designed to deliver a smooth ride, minimising passenger discomfort and out to the open water. So these are key points. If we go just down a little bit further, so these are. Thank you. The H2 Rendezvous Project will establish several supply agreements with local Queensland green hydrogen supply networks. We'll construct a 20-metre vessel on time and on budget in Queensland. We'll also have that 400 kilogram mobile hydrogen refueler on site obviously the same time as the vessel's delivered, if not before. And we want to create that local, sustained, a new workforce. So a gas fitter that's probably working in the coal mines now will quickly turn to a gas fitter of hydrogen. They're very similar, they're both gases, and as we speak, regulatory authorities in Queensland and also in the Commonwealth are coming to deal with hydrogen coming into our industry and all industries, and this is such an important job creator. So we will see in the next 2 decades hydrogen exports start to replace our exports of coal. Japan and South Korea have got a massive need for hydrogen, and we've got the ability to produce it. So that's really important transition. As I mentioned before, just this our one vessel, which is an extremely efficient vessel, by running it not on fossil fuels and on hydrogen, will reduce our own emissions by 650 tonnes per year. Obviously, the vessel will demonstrate the successful application of hydrogen in the marine transport industry and encourage further use of hydrogen as a viable zero-emission fuel. Also, this vessel will be the catalyst to the new Future Fuels Marine regulation, allowing the transition of Australian commercial vessels over to hydrogen. So we've got to write rules, basically, and the government is on board with that, and we're working very closely with them as we speak to make sure that we have the correct safety management plans in place to ensure the safe use of this fuel. Have we got the next page, folks? Which is the next page on the website. Or we can have a look at the boat really quickly. There we go. So that's a bit of the current design of the 20-metre version. And you can see all these tanks inside what we call the wing deck. And that's the hydrogen in those tanks. And the development of the tanks themselves and every part is moving so fast. At the moment, these tanks weigh 100 kilos each. And we've just started to talk to a supplier that's got new technology, and they're going to reduce that by about 80%, so down to about 20 to 30 kilos. So this technology is moving so fast, what we design now will be so much more efficient and better in the future. Alrighty, where are we? We might just go down to merit details if that's okay. Okay, so we've collaborated with some of the best people in Australia and also overseas to get to where we are now. And one very important gentleman that's who's been a fantastic supporter and a great sounding board has been Dr. Ian McKinnon from the Queensland, who's Queensland Strategic Hydrogen Advisor at QUT. And some of the comments that we just grabbed from Ian, which we find fantastic and extremely encouraging. There is a strategic opportunity for a new hydrogen industry to advance Queensland's priority for creating jobs in a strong economy. And the world's response to climate change, we need to draw on our natural advantages to meet our growing international demand for cleaner energy. Recent technological advances in the production, storage and transport of hydrogen have renewed global interest in its potential as a renewable energy carrier. And talking about the Rendezvous Project, he says, I agree with you that the opportunity to propose a use of refueling capacities that encompasses hydrogen production and the Shute Harbour Marine Terminal in the future is an exemplar for Australia. The capacity to cater for the next generation transport using low CO2 for renewable energy-based hydrogen production and storage for the operation of fuel cell buses and marine craft will be innovative, environmentally sustainable and be consistent with the premier tourism region of Australia. And again, it comes back. We've got such an asset here in the Whitsundays, being known for its beautiful islands and reef. Wouldn't it be fantastic to bring another level on top of that, which we're green, we're sustainable, we're zero emissions. That's a whole new level of tourism. And, you know, it would be fantastic to be known internationally. If you come to the Whitsundays, you're going to have a low carbon footprint and have an experience that you won't get anywhere else in the world, where you're relying on fossil fuels and diesel engines. So it's about that transition, and it's about Whitsundays being on the front foot of that, and we're definitely spearing that ahead. A little bit further down, he might have something else to say of interest.
Frank, just to let you know, we can give one of your videos a go as a test.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, let's go with that.
So we're going to be swapping over to...
Excellent. Here we go. The advances in technology. We just needed to get it on a Mac, didn't we? Okay, so how powerful is hydrogen? You know, when we're talking about hydrogen being a replacement for diesel, I'll show you how powerful it is. Press play. So these are fully loaded trucks. Diesel at the top, hydrogen fuel cell at the bottom. And we might just pause there. I know which one I'd like to be stuck behind. Okay, that's 3 years ago. Okay, and right now, Hyundai is manufacturing thousands of these trucks, and they're going into service. And they'll be here very soon. Okay, there's other truck manufacturers that we can speak about. We're going to, how far are we in? I didn't click my timer. How far are we in there?
A few minutes.
A few minutes. Yeah. Okay, so I've talked a lot about fuel cells, but it's important that you understand how they work, okay, because it might not make much sense. So I'll introduce Albert Bergman from Hyundai. He's got a very strong European accent, so we can trust him. He's very factual. And we'll let him have a bit of a chat about hydrogen fuel cells, so we can press play.
When did the hydrogen fuel cell start its career? The first remarkable application of hydrogen fuel cells started in the 1960s for satellites and spacecraft of the Gemini and Apollo programs. We expected that bringing hydrogen fuel cells to the public would not be easy. Nonetheless, Hyundai Motor Group anticipated the future potential of hydrogen fuel cell at an early stage. In 1998, Hyundai started to develop a hydrofuel cell car and has made continuous efforts to make significant progress to the present day. In February 2013, Tucson FCEV was released for the first time in the world, opening the door to the mass production of fuel cell EVs. Then, in 2018, Hyundai released the next generation hydrogen fuel cell SUV, Nexo. Our Nexo is ranked as the FCEV with the most sales worldwide. But we didn't stop there. We plan to use our fuel cell EVs in various fields. First is the key to logistics, trucks. The big challenges in long-haul, zero-emission, heavy-duty truck operation is refueling time and range. The zero-emission powertrain of our Action fuel cell truck consists of two Nexo fuel cell systems, a hybrid high-voltage battery for energy recuperation, and a powerful electric motor. Our Hyundai Action fuel cell truck is the first mass-produced heavy-duty fuel cell truck in the world and started operating in Switzerland last summer.
Okay, so hydrogen economy is dependent on four key successes. Okay, hydrogen production, hydrogen storage, and fuel cell technology and infrastructure such as transportation of that hydrogen. The Whitsundays has access to all four of these technologies right now. So what is a fuel cell and how does it work? Basically, a fuel cell is a power generator like an engine. A fuel cell differs from a battery which stores electricity. A fuel cell system consists of a fuel cell stack that generates electricity, a hydrogen supply system, an air system, and a heat exchanger. It generates power by combining hydrogen and oxygen, but without the carbon emissions. Unlike a battery that passively stores energy, are we still playing? Through chemical reactions, it operates as long as fuel is supplied to the fuel cell. The science is simple. A fuel cell is just a reverse reaction of water electrolysis that we all learnt in Year 8 science class. The core competitiveness of a fuel cell technology is comprised of the cost and durability. The most important for cost is the reduction, is the stack, I should say. There's 400 cells combined in a stack, and the cost of this part accounts for the largest portion. The structure of the fuel cell is shown in this figure. The cell consists of two bipolar plates which provide the flow channels for hydrogen and oxygen, and that supports the structure of the stack. Two gas diffusion layers are here, and a membrane electrode which is called the MEA. The MEA forms the core part of the fuel cell and is the key component that generates electricity. By causing a chemical reaction between hydrogen and oxygen. In the past, the high cost of fuel cells has made the use of them in the marine transport sector prohibitive until now. However, in 2006, the cost was reduced by half, and then the cost of the first generation fuel cell system installed in the first mass-produced Tucson FCEV in 2013 was 10% of the first model and developed 10 years before. And now you can see in this graph that we're down to 2% of the original prototype cost. So these costs are falling. So it's going to be accessible to all of us. That's why we're going to have fuel cell cars. Alrighty, the average durability of fuel cell stacks at the time was only 821 hours, which is only 1.5 year durability. You can see through this progression that we'll see that the durability of a fuel cell has turned to 40,000, 100,000 kilometres, and now we're at 160,000 kilometres, and then the target, which we're working on in the next fuel cells, is to 500,000 to 1 million kilometres. We're getting a little short on time, so we might just pause that there, and I'll just close on a couple of key remarks. Is that other video, it goes for 10 seconds, is that there? It's called Little Fairy. This is this morning. If we have a listen to this. That's 71 decibels of noise. It doesn't have to be that way, okay? We can change over to fuel cells with zero noise and zero carbon footprint and zero emissions. And we just hope that Rendezvous will be out in the water in the coming years and prove the point that we can move over to zero emissions and the tourism industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. That was great. I hope you've got some questions to ask Frank at the end of the session because he will be sticking around. Yep. Certainly. Fantastic. So thanks for bearing with us too through the tech. We're pretty much on top of it now. So I'm very, very pleased to be inviting up our second speaker. He's come from all the way from Western Australia, so a huge effort to be here with us. Really appreciate the time he's taken to come over here and share this his company's journey. But a bit of background about Aaron first. He grew up in coastal country town in the north of Western Australia, a town dominated by mining and salt industries, and the new player in the town, Woodside. This is where his 30-plus year career in the oil and gas sector commenced. So Aaron has delivered positive and sustainable results across a range of roles, from technical, operational and management to leadership, delivering safe and successful operational business units and projects. In 2018, Aaron commenced his career transition, a genuine desire and drive to contribute positively to a cleaner future, researching the emerging green hydrogen economy and the opportunities that it presents, and research that led to the creation of the H2 Energy Company in 2019. So please, a warm welcome for Aaron Smith.
Does that hold? Well, thanks very much for the introduction. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I thank Lee and Olivia for the opportunity to speak today, and the Coral Sea Academy, Marina and the Clean Innovation Hub for hosting today's event. We're nearly there. So today I'm just going to I've been requested to provide a brief introduction to H2 Energy Company and who we are. I'll provide an intro into green hydrogen and renewable hydrogen, add to a little bit of what Frank educated us on earlier. And I'll also introduce the Whitsundays Renewable Energy Project and provide an update on the timeline associated with that. And then we'll talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities that the green hydrogen industry offers Australia. So H2 Energy Company is an independent, integrated, renewable green hydrogen production and distribution company. So we have a build, own, operate model, which means we'll build and own the renewable energy, we'll build and own the green hydrogen production and storage equipment, and we'll also distribute the product to our customers. And the main purpose of that is to ensure we have a traceable, green, renewable product to our customers in gaseous hydrogen. As Lee said, we were founded in March 2019. We have We have a leadership team of 4 with greater than 115 years experience in the energy and infrastructure sectors, with 3 of us having worked together for more than 15 years together in the energy sector successfully. We are active in Western Australia, New South Wales and Queensland, with our first project being here in the Whitsundays. Okay, we're ready to go. So what is, Frank's sort of given us an education on what is green hydrogen. I'll just touch on it again. So renewable green hydrogen in essence is hydrogen gas produced using renewable electricity, which powers an electrolyzer. The output of the electrolyzer is hydrogen gas and oxygen. We then compress that hydrogen, store it, and look to distribute that to our customers. There are many means to transport that to our customers, one being via pipelines, and at the moment we can blend that to a certain percentage for existing infrastructure. And then also we have the road and rail options to distribute to the customers. There are a number of different colours of hydrogen. I think every colour of the rainbow at the moment has for hydrogen, but I'll touch on only a couple today. So the primary, about 95-98% of hydrogen that's produced globally at the moment is from fossil fuelled process called steam methane reforming. We call that grey hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is using the same process, steam methane reforming. However, they capture the CO2 emissions and store those. And as Frank said, green hydrogen is a zero emission energy source, energy carrier. And it has many applications from transport to heat for power and buildings, and also for industry, and the feedstock to industry primarily being ammonia and steel manufacturer. Next slide, thanks. The story so far in Australia, whilst hydrogen is globally available today, the zero emission hydrogen story began in Australia in August 2018 with the release of the CSIRO National Roadmap. And from there, as you can see from this page, every state in Australia at the moment has an action plan, a strategy or a roadmap to bring to life the hydrogen economy. I've lost count of the number of prospective projects in Australia, but there's likely to be between 200 and 300 prospective projects being considered for development around Australia at the moment, in every state, from very small to very large pilot to demonstration projects, including, and there are only a handful of projects at the moment that are actually in operation in terms of zero emission hydrogen. Next slide. So moving on to focusing about use cases, potential use cases. Frank's talked a lot about this today, so I won't harp too long on it, but my research has sort of shown that there are ferries globally commercialised in operation at the moment, primarily in the States and Europe. They range from varying sizes, of course, right up to the MF Hydro, which was the Ship of the Year this year, recently awarded. That's a 82 metre, it's this one here, it's 82 metre, 299 packs, 80 passenger cars in Europe. They are fuelled either by liquefied hydrogen or gaseous hydrogen, or in the case of the Hydro Bingo in Japan, which was the first one launched allegedly in the world, that's actually a dual fuel diesel hydrogen internal combustion engine drive ferry. So it has a significant reduction in emissions associated with that. So moving from the commercialised and in operation ferries, we move into the pleasure boating, similar to what Frank's looking at in terms of catamarans and the like. We have the Hyundai out of France, which is available for pre-order if you go to their website. The Aquan also out of Switzerland. The catamaran is under development at the moment. So certainly the interest is or the commercialisation is coming for these vessels in Europe. And we have a Australian designed futuristic super yacht if you're interested in what the future may look like. Very exciting. Yep. Okay, Frank gave us all a university degree on fuel cells and how they work, so I won't harp too much on that other than to say that, so Frank mentioned Hyundai, there are also Toyota and many other manufacturers that are manufacturing fuel cells at the moment for marine applications. They're zero emission, as Frank said, they're silent, very clean, and the only emission is water with a little bit of heat associated with that. They're modular, so they can start from the tens of kilowatts through to megawatts, so it can fulfill many applications in the marine sector. They can be hybridised, so you can include, as Frank said, you can include a fuel cell with your diesel engine and your current battery electric system. Advantages with that, if you don't use it for propulsion, are that when you're at anchor, you can operate very silently with no emissions, with the power being sourced from the fuel cell. And that's it. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, refueling. Refueling, not too dissimilar to what's used in the passenger vehicles and trucks, etc. at the moment in terms of refueling, i.e. with the nozzles and hoses, etc. But with the marine aspect, obviously we're operating in a marina or a port, etc. So there are a few other options. We have the portable options where you can bring the skid to location, hose and nozzle to the vessel. We can have the mobile refuelers, which Frank was talking about, so you can transport the hydrogen around with the refueling with a HRS offtake. And the trial was carried out this year between Yanmar and Toyota. And what they trialled was a 700 bar, which is the same pressure hydrogen gas that's used in the passenger vehicles at the moment on the road. They used that as a trial with a very long prototype hose, which is this one here in Osaka Bay, to demonstrate that high pressure gaseous hydrogen can be fueled with a long hose to a marine vessel. So it is happening, and it's happening around the globe. And then again, there's all these conceptual designs coming. So here we have out of Europe a conceptual design in a floating, it's actually a production, storage and offloading facility for marinas, etc., etc. So very exciting. So over and above the opportunity that Frank's talked about in the marine sector, and Frank did touch on it, there are other opportunities for the region to decarbonise across that whole tourism supply chain, and that is an on-island and an off-island opportunity. So at the moment we have 2 cars certified for Australian roads and in use at the moment, being the Toyota Myra and the Hyundai Nexo. There are actually 5 Hyundai Nexos with the Queensland government at the moment in the state, within their fleet. Very exciting news, late October, for the launch of the first hydrogen-fuelled or powered Hyzon coach. This one here was launched late October in Queensland. They partnered with BLK Auto to deliver that bus. Those buses, there's going to be 10 of those buses come into the country, or coaches should I say, come into the country, and they're destined for a mine in Western Australia, north of Western Australia. So they are well suited, they've been tested and trialled to the hot environment, similar to here, and the dusty environment of the mines. We have many trucks available now, as Frank said. You've got the Hyundai Exience and you have Hyzon, have Australian approved Class 8 trucks available, prime movers. And we have material handling forklifts, tens of thousands of these in operation in the States at the moment and Europe, hydrogen fuelled. We also have yard tractors in ports under trial in the port of Rotterdam, so in operation at the moment. And we have HISA developing reach stackers for container movements at ports, etc. So it's all happening, and it's happening very, very quickly, as Frank said. Further to that, we also have stationary fuel cells, so not just the fuel cells for marine applications, we have stationary applications where we can have 1-2 megawatts of fuel cells available in containers to displace diesel power generation on island or off island. So again, very quiet, zero emission opportunity there. Next slide, thanks. Okay, a little bit about our Whitsunday's Renewable Energy Project. So the project will be located halfway between Bowen and Proserpine. We're very fortunate to have a forward-looking, innovative partner in Top Shelf International. Top Shelf International are an ASX-listed company and a distilling company, and are looking to distill agave spirit in the region for the domestic and international markets. They're very keen and supportive of activating the hydrogen market in the region, and will adopt hydrogen technology at their farm and for distribution where it makes sense, obviously. They have about over 400,000 agave plants planted already. They started planting in 2020, and they're going to 1 million plants over the next few years. The target for first distilling for the agave distillery will be the second half of 23. So we need to have our renewable energy power ready for them. So we've been tasked to provide the renewable energy and the hydrogen for the facility. We'll have the power. The facility will be distilling hydrogen in the second half of 23 for the domestic and export markets. And we'll have hydrogen following very closely in the same. So second half of 23, hydrogen will be available. Green hydrogen will be available in the region. We expect to not only service Top Shelf, we would love to service Frank with the hydrogen in the region. Again, a very local supply, and it all makes very much sense. We will be active trying to promote hydrogen for trials within the region. We'll have on offer a mobile refueling station and product for the uptake of the technology. Next slide, thank you. Okay, moving on from just general challenges with the hydrogen sector. Frank's touched on a few of those. As you can see here, we've got, from an industry perspective, we have a chicken and egg issue where there isn't a lot of supply at the moment, and there isn't a lot of demand because there isn't a lot of infrastructure to fuel the technology that's available. As Frank said, they are high capital costs for the core components of the production of green hydrogen, being the electrolyzer and the fuel cells. There's still very high costs associated with those, and we can't produce hydrogen that is competitive with fossil fuels at the moment. In terms of policies and regulations, there, as Frank said, I think the last number I saw, there's 270 lines of legislation I think that needs to be amended to help us activate the hydrogen economy appropriately in the future. And of course, look, with any emerging and nascent industries such as the zero-emission hydrogen industry, there is a bunch of familiarity that needs to occur with government, industry, the general public, and the communities in which we operate. So it's very important as a producer to have our social licence and maintain our social licence to operate in the communities that we operate. There are skills and knowledge gaps, as Frank said, but these are very easily overcome. We're a very highly skilled technical nation, so we'll overcome those very easily. And if we look, it's all a bit of a mess, isn't it? If we look at, I guess, challenges associated, if we narrow it down to the region in particular, the chicken and egg issue, we are looking at overcoming that with demand from Frank, Top Shelf, and providing the infrastructure and supply. Costs will come down. They're coming down now. As Frank said, they're coming down quite quickly. And we expect that to continue similar to that of the solar and wind hardware. What also benefits our cost of product to customers is scale. So if we have larger demand, we have larger production, there is economies of scale with our production equipment, etc., so we can provide a lower unit cost to our customers. We have a very supportive Queensland government when it comes to policy and regulation. So the Queensland government released their hydrogen strategy in 2019. They are a member of the Zero Carbon Certification Scheme, which is very important to H2EC, and that is a scheme that is looking to be able to capture and record the carbon intensity associated with the production of hydrogen. So as a green renewable hydrogen company, that's very important to us, and it's great to see that the Queensland government is a member of that. And there are a number of initiatives in place at the moment to overcome or enable the social acceptance of hydrogen in the wider community through innovation hubs, hydrogen clusters across the nation, and we're a member of the H2Q hydrogen cluster here in Queensland. And there's a number of working groups that we're a member of in terms of the hydrogen industry working group, which is industry and tertiary education, etc. And we expect that these challenges should be overcome within 5 to 10 years, if not sooner. There's significant political and social pressure to decarbonise, as we all know at the moment, and a lot of positive industry appetite to deliver this economy going forward. Next slide, thanks. Next slide, yep, there we go, thanks. So where there's challenges, there's obviously opportunities. So we see many, many opportunities with the zero-emission green hydrogen economy. And yes, the hydrogen barbecue does exist. So we can buy those if you need those right now. They're being used around Australia at the moment. Of course, it comes, a new industry, a nascent industry comes with new skills, new jobs, and those jobs are offered across the whole value chain. That can include the manufacture, the servicing, as well as the operation and distribution, etc. It is a significant opportunity for Australia, domestically and globally, as Frank said, it's an export opportunity. Hydrogen is complementary to other renewable energy sources, so it does offer resilience and diversity in your energy needs, particularly in remote and off-grid locations. And as I said before, it has a wide range of applications. And it does offer zero emissions. We've touched on that many times today, but when using a fuel cell, there are zero emissions. And it does reduce the harmful particulates, the NOxes and the SOxes associated with diesel and the horrible smelly fumes. Over and above all of that, it does offer energy security. So at the moment we rely a lot on imports of our fossil fuels, so producing hydrogen locally does improve this energy security in Australia. And finally, I'd just like to highlight a decarbonisation study that was carried out on 4 islands in the Whitsundays. It was a report initiated by the Department of Environment and Science. It was issued in March 21 this year. That was carried out by Energetics. So they looked at 4 islands. A great report. They looked at all options to decarbonise the islands. And some recommendations that came out of that report suggested that we should look at feasibility studies associated with using green hydrogen to decarbonise marine transport, power generation, and on-island transport. Next slide, thank you. So I'd just like to thank everybody for your attention today. Whitsundays and green hydrogen, this is a real opportunity to decarbonise on-island and off-island. We will have green hydrogen here from 2023. We are very open to talking to prospective partners to activate this region. It's a very exciting time. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. That was a really interesting presentation. I love the idea of a green barbecue. Every single house in Australia could have a hydrogen barbecue. Get rid of the natural gas, which is kind of marketed a bit wrong because natural gas is actually predominantly methane, which is one of the most toxic greenhouse gases. So a hydrogen barbecue would be a great step forward for all of us in our households, so that would be excellent. So I'm sure you all learned a lot from Aaron's presentation, and thank you for joining us. We will have the panel session at the end, but we're just going to take a little minute break. If anyone wants to have a bathroom stop, grab a glass of water, we're just setting up the next presentation. They're video conferencing in, so we'll just take a second and test that system.
Spearheading. Tony is a legend in the diving world, just not of us in Queensland, Australia, and the reason why much of the anchorages around this Sunday still have people is because of Tony. So Tony was at the forefront of ensuring that there was reef markers put out in the 90s to show boat owners and boat users where the reef was, because before that, people had no idea. They just turned up to the anchorage, throw the anchor out of the coral and just wreck it. So Tony started a volunteer band with training of the divers. They worked with the to actually locate where the current is in, so you know where to anchor out. Bay Reef's just been wiped out. How do you deforest an acre of land? You get a bulldozer, two bulldozers and a chain between them, just pull it across. It's the most effective way of just flattening it.
There's a lot of life.
Oh yeah.
It's moving very quickly. The pace, like when I started researching 2015 to now where we are now, it's comfortably pace and story. Possibly come down, but there's just so much pressure globally. There's a lot of support to get this industry up and running for a number of reasons.
Well, the next 6 months is going to be critical because there's going to be those sides of politics, and even in the middle, they're going to be throwing money at things we don't know. Well, there's going to be a lot of promises. We know that. Whether those promises come into actual dollars, because we need the government to come in and support businesses like Aaron's and mine to actually subsidise that first couple of capital cost. If you keep doing that, it just brings down the next one and the next one and the next one, and it makes it harder for everybody.
Motors, they had limited life.
Yeah.
But now they're like, what is that?
For the lifespan, what I read, and the loading you've had 30,000 miles of operations thereabouts. So if you operate no, so they just replace the plates. You'd know maybe more, but I'm hearing because most of the manufacturers just want to replace the stacks. So I think it's an opportunity in the future to be looking at servicing plastic.
Hydrogen's a very corrosive gas. Right? It doesn't like other stuff. The reaction is actually yeah, but if you get 30,000 hours out of diesel engine, you're going, you know, 30,000 hours is a lot of hours on the diesel engine. So that's where we are now. In 3 years' time, it'll be 60,000 hours. You know?
Yeah, I think
well, some might want that.
And look, to be honest, that 30,000 hours is only because the efficiency, they don't stop working. Their efficiency goes from, let's say, 60% efficient to 40% efficient. So they're very efficient. Fuels are very efficient. But you can keep operating at a lower efficiency.
Yeah.
And the cost, because your operating costs go down.
So what we'll do is we'll probably have about 400 watts available to us. But to push the vessel along at the speed that we want to use, we're only about 300 euros. So, and that's the technology now. So the fuel cells that are going to come into line in the next 2 years just get more and more efficient, and they last longer and longer and longer. Then you've got the battery technology. So we have battery in between. You get these big, especially for marine vessels, you know, this first punch to get up, that's a big power drain. So what you want to do is you want to complement that with a battery with this passive storage, and it takes the shock out of things. It also gives it that big, and so it's that kind of combination. It's a hybrid system, which is no fossil fuels, just a fuel cell, battery, and electric motor.
I think it's the only one that can do
And the other ones are quite well. So much energy. And you can just see like in solar, you know, and rooftops, you know, solar. It's way ahead of the policies. Industry is way ahead of us. The amount of electricity that's being generated out there, you can't use it. You know, so we need to be able to turn that electricity into hydrogen and get hydrogen out. Well, they're looking at idiots because the states have just been jumping and they're actually, you know, New South Wales has hydrogen legislation of the plants that are out. It's awesome.
Of course, they haven't branded it, so we brand it.
It's like champagne. You can't do champagne. Any champagne is just champagne. You can't do
Agave spirit, sorry. But they'll have they'll have their own brand. It's basically just the agave spirit. So they'll brand that next year and it'll be a huge market for that product. You drive to the south, service station on the right, farms directly across the road on the left. So there's 400,000 capacity service running very good. These guys just steal this it's not new to them. He's going well, Leif. Very busy. Yeah, he's been doing work on busy, so we're ramping up our campaign for funds for the new year. Start talking commercials now. That's sorting that out. Just being able to have the power, we can finance that. Interesting when that goes, also goes there. It is something on the see where it goes.
Oh, there it is. Is this all on this one?
Thanks for bearing with us through this hybrid event.
Teams meeting. No, I haven't yet.
I'm going to introduce them.
Yes, we're ready to start. Yep, sure.
Welcome back, everybody. And we are we've managed to get our next speaker on, and she's going to be presenting remotely regarding the Queensland Hydrogen Strategy and Fund. This is Rachel Uden. She is the Director of the Hydrogen Delivery Unit from the Department of Energy and Public Works. So she'll be stepping you through the strategy and what it means for us. And thank you, Rachel. I'll just hand this over to you now.
Great. Thanks very much for the introduction, Olivia. It's great to see so many people at the meeting up there in Ellie Beach today. I wish I was there in person, but unfortunately, as a government employee, I can't always justify travel to some of the state's most beautiful spots. So I'm going to run through, I guess, an overview of the Queensland hydrogen industry, and it's great that our other two speakers today have done a very good job at introducing, I guess, hydrogen technology. Just let me know if the sound's not very clear to everyone in the room. We're having a few, I guess, technical hurdles this morning. Right, so I think there was we saw a little video just before about the Hyundai Nexo. So this is one of the Hyundai Nexos that is in Australia. I think there's just over 30 altogether. Most of them have been purchased by the ACT government, but Queensland bought 5, and that was as part of a project with BOC and I guess QUT were involved as well for some federal funding. So that photo was taken with the Brisbane Lions women's team, and the Assistant Minister is in that photo. As well, Leif Stavistrand, and that was at the official launch of the vehicles, probably a couple of months ago now. So the Queensland government launched their strategy back in 2019 for the hydrogen industry development, and since that time, even though that was just 2 years ago, there has been a huge level of interest and announcement activity. And some of the projects that you may have heard about that have been announced by the government this year include the building of electrolyzers to be done in Gladstone, which is by Fortescue Future Industries. That was announced about a month ago. And then a collaboration between Rio Tinto and Sumitomo, who have signed an MOU to use renewable hydrogen in their refinery, also in Gladstone. Arc Energy up in Townsville. Arc Energy are part of Korea Zinc, the world's largest zinc company, and Arc Energy, together with their sister company Townsville Logistics and Sun Metals, all of whom are part of the Korea Zinc family, have got a fantastic project up there to fully decarbonise their zinc refinery, as well as use renewable energy to power their hydrogen fuel cell trucks. And I think we saw a great video earlier of, I don't know if it was Hyundai or Hyzon's truck, but there's a couple of heavy vehicle manufacturers now getting into hydrogen fuel cells. So Arc Energy will be, I'm pretty sure, the first project in Australia to get hydrogen fuel cell trucks, and they'll be going from the Port of Townsville to the refinery, taking their decarbonised zinc for use overseas. And Edify Energy is another project up in Townsville that recently received development approval from the council. They're still ticking a few boxes up there, but that's another big Townsville project. So between Townsville and Gladstone, there is loads of activity happening. All of it is large scale, unlike, I guess, the Ricochet yachting proposal that we heard about earlier, which is a bit more of a small local demand story, which is equally as important. And that's just a bit of background around the strategy. 5 focus areas: supporting innovation, facilitating private sector investment, ensuring an effective policy framework for sustainable development, building community awareness and confidence, which forums like this are incredibly important for that, and facilitating skills development for new technologies. And that's another really important part of the strategy, and it's an important part of what the Queensland government is investing in at the moment, with some training infrastructure in Gladstone, Townsville and in Brisbane that will facilitate skills and training for hydrogen and renewable energy jobs. Okay, so a major part of the hydrogen industry strategy was the announcement of the Hydrogen Industry Development Fund, and a number of high-profile projects, including Sun Metals up in Townsville, received grants from that fund. And here are some of the projects you can see here. So Arc Energy up in Townsville, along with Sun Metals for their electrolyzer. Then in Gladstone, Australian Gas Networks are doing a pilot project to blend hydrogen into the existing domestic gas network. That project is underway. They are currently in the midst of their going through their development application with the local council. Gatton, which is a suburb down here in the far western outskirts of Brisbane, close to Toowoomba, that's a University of Queensland campus, and they would like to have a zero emissions hydrogen fuel cell bus that can take students from the campus or campuses in Brisbane out to their Gatton campus, which is a big agricultural college. So the idea is to have a hydrogen refueller in Brisbane and also out of Gatton, and that will refuel their hydrogen bus. And then I guess an exciting one, particularly for the Whitsundays region, is Spice's Scenic Rim. So the audience may not be aware, but Spice's is a eco-tourism brand that's very popular, particularly in the southeast corner of Queensland. I'm not sure if they've got anything in the northern areas of the state, but they are extremely high-end, very expensive ecotourism lodges in the wilderness. So I think they've got a couple in the Scenic Rim area in Brisbane, and there's a few others. Oh, there's one in Brisbane. They're very very high-end, beautiful. I've never been. I can't afford to go. These eco cabins were a recipient of the Hydrogen Industry Development Fund because, of course, there's nothing worse than you get into this 5-star, $3,000 a night luxury eco cabin, and all you can hear is the diesel generator that's powering your lights and, there's probably not a TV, lights and probably facilities in terms of toilets and showers. So they, much like Ricochet, wanting to do completely emissions-free energy for the eco cabins. So they've got a little solar farm, or quite a big solar farm out near Warwick in southern Queensland, and that's how they'll use. They're developing the technology using what's called a LAVO system to have almost like a little mini microgrid that will power these eco cabins. So that's also in development. It's not up and running quite yet, but I know the solar farm, I'm pretty sure the solar farm will be connected to the storage facilities in the very near future. So round 2, earlier this year, the Palaszczuk government announced round 2 of the Hydrogen Industry Development Fund, and this time, instead of it just being open to a big range of projects, the government decided that there are 2 areas that would really help stimulate domestic demand. So we know that the big international companies are looking at the export picture, but it's really helpful on a number of levels for, as has already been touched on today, for us to try and stimulate domestic demand. So the 2 areas of the fund are mobility and wastewater treatment plants. So we haven't announced the recipients of that fund for round 2. They're currently being evaluated, and due diligence is being done on the applicants. But I think, hopefully, fingers crossed, before the end of the year, ministers will be prepared to make an announcement. A decision will have been made by government on which projects will be recipients of that fund. So stay tuned for some exciting developments there. And as well as the Hydrogen Industry Development Fund, the Department of State Development, Local Government, Industry and Planning does a whole lot of other stuff that's really helpful from a hydrogen industry development perspective. They include project facilitation, so there's a policy within the Queensland Government that we call it the no wrong door policy, and that means no matter which department you call or write to, your ideas for a hydrogen industry related project will get to the right department, and that's either the Department of Energy and Public Works, which is me, or my colleagues in the Department of State Development, Local Government, Industry and Planning, which are Jackie and Fleur, who are right here in the room with me. So I guess looking at that, there's also an investor toolkit, which is pretty handy because this is all new. Renewable, the area of renewable hydrogen is new. Getting equipment in the country is not particularly easy. Getting planning approval for new projects is never particularly easy. Doesn't matter if it's an ecotourism resort on Great Keppel Island or any of the Whitsundays. Getting a project up off the ground is not easy. So an investor toolkit is on the Department of State Development website, and that gives you some handy hints and a guide into how to start and where to look for more information. Strategic land planning. Often with the hydrogen projects, you're going to need, if you're using hydrogen as a fuel, there are some rules and regulations that you need to abide by. If you're looking at doing anything near the ports, there's also rules that you need to abide by, and Queensland has got strategic land holdings that are, I guess, kept aside for particular projects that are going to help emerging industries or that are of use in a particular area. So that can be helpful there. The High Capability Portal is actually a federal government tool that's really useful in connecting hydrogen proponents with other government departments, as well as industry groups such as H2Q is one example, and the Australian Hydrogen Council. There's probably a handful of groups, industry-related groups, that could be really useful in terms of finding out information about other projects, finding out information about technology, and finding out about more what's going on right around the country. The Hydrogen and Renewable Energy Jobs Fund is a bit trickier. That's really for government-owned corporations to be part of. So you need to be a partner with a government-owned corporation, which at the moment are the government's energy companies, but that might be revised again, looking down the track at future rounds. So the Renewable Energy Jobs Fund was really established in order to help the government-owned corporations that at the moment are very focused on fossil fuels transition into future fuels. So it was to provide an avenue for them to apply for funding with industry partners to help transition. And the Queensland Jobs Fund is again another bucket of money that if your project is going to be supersizing jobs, particularly in regional Queensland, then these guys want it. Queensland Treasury wants to hear from you. Making Queensland hydrogen ready. Okay, so there's a couple of things government's doing in addition to allocating money to viable projects, and that's around the regulatory and policy space. So earlier this year, Minister De Brenny, who's the Energy Minister, announced that he was forming a hydrogen task force. So the task force is made up of government and non-government members, and it's their role to really look at some of the major projects, such as the export projects, but also look at domestic projects or ways that we can stimulate domestic demand to get the industry up off the ground. And I think one of the speakers earlier alluded to the chicken and egg scenario of supply and demand. We want to make sure that both those areas are stimulated, and if Queensland can be a customer, then it's also really helpful for some of our bigger suppliers, and also across the state, maybe smaller suppliers as well, because hydrogen fuel cells have got a huge range of applications, from remote power sources, as we saw with the Spices Group, through to heavy haulage trucks and also wastewater treatment. The Queensland Government Regulatory Working Group is made up of all the regulators across safety, petroleum and gas, land, and anything else that needs a regulation, which is pretty much anything. It requires a license or certification. So that this working group is an officer level group, which is really looking at as some of these projects come across the table, such as the hydrogen blending project up in Gladstone, it will be the regulators that have to work through with the proponent, what are the safety implications of an electrolyzer, for example, or how much hydrogen can the pipeline sustain to be safe when it's blended with the existing gas supply, and what rules are governing that from a national perspective, what rules govern that from a state perspective, and what are the implications? Do rules and regulations need to change to accommodate some of these new uses for hydrogen? Commonwealth working groups, again, across the country, there's so much happening, and it's a little bit like COVID. It's interesting to see how the Federation works when there are different rules in each state. So similarly with COVID and each state having a different approach to their restrictions and border closures, the Commonwealth Working Group is trying to make sure that around Australia we've all got the same rules for things such as gas blending, so that we don't have a different rule in South Australia. So Australian Gas Networks isn't having a different sort of blend of renewable hydrogen in the network in South Australia as to Queensland, unless there's environmental reasons for doing so, or community reasons for doing so. It makes things much, much easier for industry partners if we can all have the same rules across the country. And the renewable energy zones are there on the map. So again, I think it was earlier this year, $145 million was earmarked for transmission to boost the renewable production in 3 zones in Australia, in Queensland, northern, central and southern. So you guys are in the northern QRES zone, you can see on the map, you'll be just north there of Mackay. So if anyone wants to build a wind farm, go for it, because you'll be getting subsidised on your connection to the grid. So as long as this aligns with the Queensland Government strategy to boost renewables by 50% by 2030. So we're trying to incorporate as much renewable energy into the state grid and the national grid by 2030. So in order to do that, we need more solar farms and a lot more wind farms, just because you need less land and you get more bang for your buck with a wind farm. But yeah, we'll definitely need both going forward. So those zones have been set up to make it attractive to investors to build their renewable energy projects across the state. Skills and training, I think I alluded to a couple of these aspects before. $32.6 million for training. That consists of the Apprenticeship Centre in Beenleigh, which is we're doing in conjunction with the Plumbers Industry Centre for Climate Action, I think it's called, is the full name. So that's very focused on trades, particularly gas fitting and plumbing. And hydrogen and renewable energy training facility in Townsville, that will be delivered via TAFE, the Bowley TAFE. And Gladstone State High School, I think, got $2 million following the last state election for, again, transitioning students to trades, but also to science-based careers in university through Central Queensland University and the universities across the country, looking at the chemical engineering and process engineering involved, that we're going to need to build both export scale hydrogen facilities, as well as, I guess, really provide some of those innovative solutions for things like remote area renewable energy arrays and hydrogen production. That's the end. So for further information, all of those things that I've touched on can be found at the State Development website. So I think the first port of call for anyone who has questions about the Queensland State Government and the hydrogen industry should check out the State Development webpage. And if there's any questions, you can email us at hydrogen@queensland.gov.au.
Okay, so everybody, we're actually going to shut to a Q&A panel
we're just
now.
going to go to the panel
Change-
session
change
now, if
plans,
you're
I've
happy
got
with that.
Rachel online, so
Sure.
if I could please invite Frank and Aaron to, I've got some shares here for you, and let's see how
I'm
we
going to
go.
relay the questions to you so that you can hear them, Rachel, as they come
I'll sit next to
through.
Rachel.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you to everybody for understanding that I'm not there today, that I had to be stuck in Brisbane. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for sticking with us with the technology.
So we'll open the room to the panel. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask? Now, the way this will work is I'll be running around, passing the microphone to you so we can get a nice clear signal through for the YouTube recording. That's correct, Matt. So is there anybody who'd like to ask a question? Trevor.
Yeah, hi. The question I've got is relation to the fuel cells and how they work and actually create propulsion. Just correct me, I understand that the fuel cell basically makes electricity, and then the electricity would drive an electric motor. Is that correct? Yeah, sorry.
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, that's 100% correct. So the hydrogen goes into the fuel cell and mixes with the air, and oxygen's in the air, and that chemical reaction creates electricity, and a lot of electricity. Okay, now that electricity can go straight into an electric motor, or it can go via a battery and then into an electric motor. And that kind of battery hybrid solution is a real winner for the smaller boats that are out here, such as the ocean rafting boats and things like that. Because what will happen is when that vessel is at the anchorage, that fuel cell is still going, okay, and it's going to be pumping recharged energy into the battery, and then finally, when that vessel comes back to the dock, it can plug into hopefully a renewable energy stream. So if the marine is getting renewable energy, then overnight that battery can top all the way back up with renewable energy and go out the next day, and it's using that hybrid. And what that means for smaller vessels is it means that that's a reality now.
So we've I don't understand it. Yeah, oh, sorry. So we've had, in our fleet, I've got a bareboat charter fleet, and about 10 years ago we had a Lagoon 42, which was a battery-operated shaft drive, 2 electric motors, and basically operated off a genset. Look, it probably was too early for its time, and it wasn't successful, and the boat's still operating today. It's with another fleet, and they converted, unfortunately, back to diesel. But, you know, if you had a reliable fuel cell, you know, you'd swap your genset out, you would use your existing your electric motors to drive the shafts. The other question I've got is, how much heat do these fuel cells give off, and how hard would they be to retrofit in an existing boat that possibly needs a new engine or a new ferry that needs new equipment? Yeah.
So a couple of key points there. Firstly, you know, the largest ships are going around the world that don't have a diesel engine that's connected to a shaft that drives it along. Okay, they have huge generators that generate electricity, and then they need that power for all the domestic things that are going on that ship, but also they need it for their propulsion. So we can apply the same thinking, but to our vessels that we're talking about right now. So you'd have that fuel cell creating the electricity you require to recharge the batteries in your domestic use, and it's just there all the time. As far as retrofitting for propulsion, obviously it's going to be easier to build from the start with having fuel cells and making sure you're ticking all the safety management plans that need to go in, all the new regulation that's going to come into place. But the first thing that will happen as far as retrofitting will be a fuel cell that sits on the roof and it'll have a hydrogen cylinder next to it that is refueled or exchanged, and that will remove the generator on the vessel. So all these overnight boats are happening out now. You know, right now they can change over very quickly to have a fuel cell generate their power and be silent in the anchorage. And that's a big winner. And that also has flow-on effects to other industries like the commercial fishing industry. They use huge amounts of power to refrigerate and snap freeze their prawns and other produce. So it's going to be a major thing.
BOC, these guys on the exemption. Everything's...
Excellent. Did that answer the question?
I'll answer that if I can, just to answer that. Just to answer the question in relation to heat. So my understanding is that the PEM fuel cells will emit a low grade, sort of 60-65 degrees Celsius heat, which would be available to the vessel. So that will improve the overall efficiencies of the fuel cell, which is, the efficiency of a fuel cell is 60 to 40%, beginning of life to end of life. So you improve it significantly. If you can tap into that heat for maybe your showers, etc. on board, then you have that available to you as well.
Hot showers for everyone.
That's it.
So why put it on the roof?
For the retrofitting, because, you know, getting that in on board. Okay, we're talking about retrofitting a existing vessel. The most easy solution is to put on the roof. And if you have a look, you know, half the air conditioners out there are sitting on the roof anyway. So yeah, that's how we see, you know, the first initial steps in changing over existing vessels and getting them into fuel cells.
Just in relation to if you have an existing battery-powered vessel, fuel cells are a good addition in terms of just range extension. So it can provide that additional range over and above what the battery can provide you.
Thank you. When you were speaking earlier, you mentioned agave and electrolyzer and their function in the, obviously they have a function in the fuel cell. Could you explain that for us? The electrolyzer?
Yeah, sorry. So electrolyzer is the hydrogen production unit hardware. So what we basically do with an electrolyzer is we have water as the sole input. We apply renewable electricity via the electrolysis process, and we split the water into hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. The agave comes into it because they want to be an end user of hydrogen and our renewable electricity, but also ultimately they'll have a lot of wastewater which we'll look to use as a circular economy. So we'll use that water to split into hydrogen, to create hydrogen. Yeah, sort of, yeah. We are looking at using fuel cells on site, so we'll be looking at utilising that low-grade heat in the distillery if it makes sense. Yep.
So the electrolyzer part of that?
Sorry, the electrolyzer is the core component that produces hydrogen gas. Yep, from electricity.
So it's like a membrane or something like that? Or
Yes, correct, yep. Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Or is it like an electrolyte?
No, it's purely a membrane, that's correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There are about 4 different types globally, but we'll be looking at the PEM electrolyzer.
And just further that, to give you a bit of an idea, from electricity to hydrogen, okay, so we need 50 kilowatt hours of electricity to produce 1 kilo of hydrogen, okay? And all we're doing is just pumping electricity into water, and when we do that, it splits it. It splits it into hydrogen and oxygen. Okay, and we're interested in the hydrogen, but there's also a lot of applications such as sewage treatment plants that are looking to have their own electrolyzer, sell their hydrogen to us and other users. They want the oxygen because what that does is they pump the oxygen into their wastewater treatment plants and it increases their efficiency by, you know, many times over. So it's a win-win for everyone.
So the oxygen can also be used for in the agri farm, so your prawn farming and things like that, to improve the farm's efficiencies.
I saw a YouTube video the other week with JCB diggers in the UK, and they've developed an internal combustion hydrogen engine. I just wondered if you could maybe flush that out for us as an idea.
It's a great idea. They've done very well and succeeded very well. And I've watched the same video. Look, most OEMs at the moment are or have already created and converted and are producing 100% hydrogen internal combustion engines. That includes gas turbines as well. So the Caterpillars of the world and the likes, Yembakers, GE, they're all doing it. So it is a thing. And that may be a stepping stone. If you have an existing diesel Caterpillar, for instance, as your main propulsion, it might be a stepping stone to either look to blend, so talk to the OEM, look to blend hydrogen up to about 30%. It actually improves the efficiency of the engine and reduces your emissions. And then longer term, when you're looking to replace that asset, you'd be able to swap it out for equivalent 100% hydrogen internal combustion engine.
One of the concerning numbers that we keep hearing in the media is this $2 a kilo. And I'm sure you guys will be across that that's just a fictitious number. They're not taking the multiple of nearly 5 times the energy in a kilo of hydrogen. I mean, what are we going to do about that? Because it seems to me that they're setting up the industry as being not progressive if we don't hit $2 a kilo, which would place diesel. Diesel's going to go close to $2 a litre shortly. So, we're just not comparing apples with apples, and it just consistently keeps coming out.
You'll start.
Yeah. I'll start.
So when it comes to a kilo of hydrogen versus a kilo of diesel, hydrogen has 5 times the energy density. Okay, and once we push it through an electrolyzer, it's a factor of 4. Okay. So that means that if you're paying $2, which I'm paying right now, $2 a litre for diesel, parity, meaning it's the same price as diesel, okay, is going to be around that $10 mark, okay? So $10 a litre, a kilo of hydrogen. So if Aaron sells me a kilo of hydrogen for $10 a kilo, I'm at parity now. It's the same as me burning diesel. Okay, now that's going to drop. Okay, so the first kind of costs or the purchase price is going to be somewhere between $10 and $16 a kilo, but it's already been forecast that that's going to drop to around $6 a kilo within the next 10 years, and possibly even lower. Okay, and if we start paying $2 a kilo for hydrogen, that's comparable to 50 cents a litre of diesel.
Can someone tell the government that?
Yeah.
That's right. They're going to kill the industry if they're not very careful. It's a fictitious number that keeps popping out in the press constantly, and that was driven out of the US where it was $2 US a kilo. That was a target they'd like to achieve in the next 10 years, but Taylor and co keep grabbing that number, and it's as if they're wanting the industry, if it doesn't get to that, it's not successful. I think it's really important that the 5-time multiple of energy, which we know, is more commonly spoken about, because it's not a good number to have out in the industry.
Yeah, well, we'll prove that it is.
I might repeat this question to Rachel online, if you can hear me, Rachel. We're just having a discussion. Are you there, Rachel? You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry, I was on mute.
Yep, no worries. We've just had a question from the floor. It sparked a little bit of discussion about the price of hydrogen being comparable at the moment to diesel, but about the risk of that due to the embodied energy and hydrogen being much greater, and it being a little bit confusing in comparing the real cost of hydrogen energy compared to diesel energy. So do you understand the question? Do you have any comments around that?
Yeah, this is a good one because I think people fixate on the $2 a kilo price of renewable hydrogen. That was announced as a sort of stretch goal by the Federal Minister Angus Taylor, I think earlier this year, as part of their low emissions technology roadmap, or one of the federal government's initiatives, and I think it might have come out of actually the National Hydrogen Strategy way back in I think that came out in 2019 as well, where Professor Alan Finkel was talking about a goal of $2 hydrogen, renewable hydrogen would need to be at a cost of about $2 to be commercially viable. Now he was talking about $2 from an export perspective when he was comparing renewable hydrogen with LNG. Again, export prices of LNG, which I think at the time were around about $15 a kilo. Don't quote me on that, but or maybe $8 to $15 a kilo, depending on what the offtake agreements were. But my point is that that $2 had a very strong export focus for potential customers who are currently our LNG customers who are importing millions of tonnes of fuel, whether it's LNG or, in this case, perceived renewable hydrogen. Now, whether or not hydrogen will ever reach $2 Australian dollars a kilo is a long and complicated journey. And it also doesn't take into consideration anything like carbon taxes that our export partners may put on fuel that has not been produced via renewable means or will not be transported via renewable means. The conversations about cost are a long way off, and it's actually not comparing apples and apples if you're comparing it to the diesel that you're putting in your car now. But because again, the industry is it's still a long way off. All these talk about electrolyzers. There's currently 2 electrolyzers in the whole state, and they're tiny. They're 170 kilowatts. So we don't have an operational electrolyzer anywhere near the scale you would need to be producing even hundreds of tonnes of renewable hydrogen at the moment. And we also don't have the renewable energy capacity either, yet. So this is definitely an emerging industry, and that $2 price was part of that long-term emerging industry scenario. The big advantage, and you can say this about electrification as well as hydrogen, and we're hearing more about sort of the car industry and fuel now, and it's because of the fact that EVs, electric vehicles, and whether they're battery EVs or hydrogen fuel cell EVs, are using electricity that is just becoming so cheap to generate. So a lot of people who are buying EVs, and they're probably not as popular for good reason up around North Queensland as they are in the cities and certainly overseas. But Minister de Brenny has often talked about, well, why wouldn't I want an EV where I can fuel at home? I literally just plug my car in and I know what price I'm paying for electricity. I've got solar panels on the roof. I'm in charge of the fuel that I'm putting in my car. It's really simple. Whereas at the moment in Australia, there's 2 remaining oil refineries, and we don't produce any liquid petroleum in Australia. So we refine the product here, but we import all our crude, petrol and diesel. It's all imported. So we've got absolutely no control over the price we pay of that crude oil item, and they're all controlled by multinationals. I think it's BP who owns Kwinana in WA, and we've got Ampol, which is part of the Caltex group here in Queensland. If they decide to shut those refineries, we're even more dependent upon international corporations and shipping for us to fuel our cars. And I guess with the price of electric vehicles coming down, people are sort of saying, well, actually, it makes sense. We are never going to run out of electricity, renewable electricity in Australia. It's very, 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 very slim chance. And I guess we're just in that situation at the moment where the infrastructure, we haven't got the same level of EV charging capabilities that, for example, California has. But we will get there, and the Queensland government, as part of its zero emissions strategy is looking at boosting the EV superhighway. And there is an EV superhighway that goes all the way up to Port Douglas, and there will be, I'm pretty sure there's charging stations either in Mackay or near Airlie Beach, but there'll only be like 2, and they're probably never used. So the infrastructure's coming, the cars are certainly coming, EVs are getting more and more popular every month. So I guess I wouldn't worry too much about the $2 debate, because even the price of hydrogen, particularly renewable hydrogen, is all about the price of energy. So the cheaper renewable energy is, the cheaper it will be to either fuel your car using straight electricity, or the cheaper it will be to produce hydrogen. And the hydrogen fuel cells are being looked at particularly for things like heavy vehicles and in the resources industry, like Sun Metals up in Townsville.
Thanks, Rachel.
Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that, Aaron?
That's fine. Yeah, look, thanks, Rachel. I tend to agree. I think the initial $2, from my understanding, initial $2 came from Japan putting their hand up and saying $2 is a target cost of hydrogen per kilogram. I think the other confusing thing with the messaging from the government with the $2 target is that $2 target was at the farm gate, which effectively means at the outlet of the electrolyzer. So on top of that, you have costs for compression and storage, and then obviously transport and distribution. So there are costs on top of that to deliver. So it is a very, I guess, confusing messaging. So absolutely agree with that. But and the other thing, actually, I've completely forgotten what I was going to say.
Maybe.
Actually, what we are hearing when it comes to pricing, we're talking to a lot of potential customers, particularly in the heavy vehicle transport and logistics companies. And what's very important to them is the zero emission messaging. So if they were to buy green hydrogen, they actually don't have too much of an issue to pay a small premium over and above what they're paying for diesel at the moment.
And it gives us the power. Like, you know, Aaron and I can have our own fuel agreement, and we can say, for the next 12 months, I'm going to pay this amount for my hydrogen. It's given the power back. We've never had that power to negotiate a fuel price, you know. This is giving power to local communities on how they purchase their energy.
Sure you want to give power to Aaron?
I think it works both ways, the chicken and egg issue here.
But it just won't be Aaron. It's going to be, you know, other suppliers. You know, it's going to be a commodity that's going to be competitive, and it's going to give us choice. And that's fantastic. You know, it's giving local communities, you know, creating local jobs and giving us the power to purchase, you know, our fuel that we need and consume, and it's all happening right here.
Okay, so we've got time for one last question. I think Councillor Grundy has one there.
Just one question regarding fuel excises and how the government going to deal with this changing world of revenues, which I think we currently net about $11 billion a year after outgoings, and I'd be interested to understand where we may go in that space in the future, particularly if you're doing contracts with each other and how it works in that taxing space.
You can guarantee they're going to tax it. Okay, and you know how that looks in the future, we don't know. Okay, so it might be something that I don't know that Rachel might speak further to. Like, she's not in the Treasury, but it's going to be taxed. It's you know, as we replace fossil fuels, they're going to want the money to come from where the excise on fossil fuels and move it to where it's going. So let's just hope whatever taxes is paid on renewable fuels like hydrogen, that just goes towards more renewable energy, you know, and zero emissions technology. So yeah, I dare say if it can be taxed, it will be taxed, but hopefully it's a green tax.
Do you want me to ask Rachel that question? Rachel, are you there to put some input into this?
Yes.
Last question from the floor is from Councillor Grundy, and it was around there's obviously a lot of income generated from taxes currently on fossil fuels, etc. And the question was, what does it look like in the renewable resources energy space, and how is that revenue going to be captured? Is there any plans for that at the state or federal level at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question, and I think it's one that governments at all levels are looking at. It's not so much, I guess, a tax that governments benefit from now as much as, well, royalties on what are natural resources. So I guess with the fossil fuel industry, we've depended on digging stuff out of the ground and selling it. It's been a natural resource. With renewable hydrogen, it's a manufactured product at the end of the day, and it's completely a legitimate question to say, well, how do the schools and roads get built if we're not generating royalties from that? So the federal government are looking very, very closely at that, and I think in my presentation I mentioned some of the Commonwealth working groups that are going on with the states and the Commonwealth, and I think economists are looking at a lot of models at the moment around shared infrastructure and who will own the pipelines, who owns our ports, will there be shipping charges? All those sorts of really big questions are being asked at the moment. So nobody's got any answers, and it's again a while off. I don't think we're going to see change, certainly from a revenue perspective in the next two to 5 years. Things probably aren't going to change a lot until we really hit that big commercial export scale, but it's certainly something governments are looking at.
Thanks, Rachel. All right, we might end the little panel session, so thank you, Rachel, for your time today.
And thanks to Aaron and to Frank. If you could please give them
Oh, you're welcome.
warm hand. That's fine, don't worry about that. Okay, so while we're just going to get set up for our final presentation now, this gentleman unfortunately hasn't been able to make it from Norway. However, there is good news. We've been able to pose some questions to him, which we thought would be the kinds of questions that you would bring up in a panel Q&A such as this. So there'll be a brief introduction to the company that this gentleman has started in Norway and now has a global presence. I'll be running through a short bio shortly, and then that will be followed by the Q&A sessions, questions that we pose to him. So, our final presenter is Leif Stavistrand. He was born in Canada but grew up on, in and by the ocean on a fairy tale island in western Norway. From an early age, boats were the main interest, and his passion led him into a maritime career, sailing the seven seas, circumnavigating the globe numerous times, including a role as sea captain of an 89-metre tanker at 32 years of age. He holds formal qualifications in naval architecture and also holds an executive MBA. So following the birth of his first daughter in 2012, he moved onshore with Norway's largest oil supply base, culminating with the role as COO. And his proudest moment was kickstarting the Green and Lean Base initiative, cutting large amounts of greenhouse gases directly and indirectly. This successful project is still ongoing to this day. In 2018, a new era began when Leif decided to combine all his passions and experience and concern for global warming to found his company Evoy with his father. By 2019, their demo boat Evoy 1 was baptised by Norway's PM. And later that year, it made an unofficial world record with 55 knots. In 2020, the first customers received their turnkey powerful electric propulsion systems in the boats of their choice. And the voyage has only just begun, and he is in it for the long haul. So we'll take you to the introduction to the company. Now, how are we going, Matt? Yep. Sound.
Oops.
Renewable electric, you were old. They had a clear goal to disrupt the whole maritime industry like Tesla did with cars. Evoy was founded in Refueller, Norway. The idea had been brewing in me and my father's imagination and dreams ever since the night in 2005 we did one of our whiskey workshops. Finally, in 2018, we took the lead and set out to do something no one had done before us, making boats go fast and long on pure electricity. Since then, grown into a team of about 30 people from all over the world. The great diversity and competence in the team accelerates us towards the vision of making boating irresistible and thereby making a significant contribution to cutting greenhouse gases.
Is there a second one?
Yes.
Yep.
Next page. Yep.
So I'm Leif Stavistrand, I'm the CEO of Evoy. Evoy, we design, develop and deliver high output electric systems for boats. Typical boats between 20 to 50 feet in single, double or maybe even triple installations. And it's important to note that we don't make the boats themselves, we really just make the technology or the system that you can put into any boat. So that means we can also do retrofits and we can do as well as new boats. So it's a good place to be, so to speak. Where we are at now, we have, for us, it's a to Z system. So the system that we put together is plug and play from our side. So it means that we can hand it over to you and everything is there. There's no worry about buying this or that. Everything is there out of the box. So you can just plug and play it into the boat, install it, and off you go. And in terms of what we have available, we have what we call the Hurricane in second generation now, coming in second generation, which means that it's tightened up, cleaned up, really easy to install in the boats, and it's also optimized around power and output. And this is a system that actually goes into our first boat, that's and also our second boat. The first boat we did 55 knots with back in 2019, and the second boat is, should I say, significantly faster than that. So we can pound out quite a bit of power through our systems. Secondly, we also have our output ready for the market next year. Now the first deliveries are for pilot customers in Q1, and then we'll move into, gradually as we move on, into a bit of a larger market. So that's something that we really, really look forward to. So there's a lot behind the scenes and under the hood, or whichever you want to call it, that's going on. So we, right now, we're looking for putting into 3 different levels into place. So we have the Hurricane, of course, which is strongest, naturally. Then there is the Storm and the Gale. The Storm is on our lab, but it's not out on the water yet. And then, of course, we're making different versions with the inboards and the outboards. Right now, it's the Gale that we have in the outboard version, and it's the Hurricane for the inboard. So that's the main product lines that we have, and it's 400 horsepower, it's 230 and 150 horsepower. As we tweak and continue on this might change in the future, but that's where we're at today. And it's really exciting to work with, so to speak. So I think the interest that we have from around the world is quite immense. It's really nice to see that this is something that gives a lot of interest, and we try to follow up, but it's not easy because we're just 30 people here, so we're doing our best to try to follow up as good as we can. The Hurricane is there. It's the 400 horsepower. It's already in the market. I assume when it's thinking about the outboards, which of course we're getting humongous demands for. So the core business of Evoy is our electrical systems. That's where we can shine. That's where we're really good. And it takes time to develop the mechanical solutions to go along with electrical. So we'll see. We'll do a lot of testing during next year, and based on that, we'll see when the larger systems can be ready, because we can't use the same lower leg for the larger systems as we use for the small one today. But again, we hope that in 2023 we can bring something cool to the market. That's cool. So you have a rule of thumb. which is useful for everyone, I think. So when you convert from gasoline or diesel towards electric, you're looking about a factor of 3 to 4 between the internal combustion engines to electric. So it means if you have 1 liter per nautical mile today, you can then look at about 3 to 4 kilowatts per hour per nautical mile. Some nerdy facts there, but it means that if you have a battery pack of 120 kilowatt hours, which is quite standard for a lot of our boats, you can then typically look at between 20 to 30 nautical miles range. And this depends on weight on the boats, which is the hugest factor on the range. And of course, the holes of the boat and all these things. But that's approximately where we are today. And then there's lots of projects that do foils, that do air between the holes, steps, stuff like that, that even increases that range even more. But most boats are standard vehicle, and that's what we're working towards. And that's in plain low speed. In low speed, you can go all day. As an example from our current boat, we can do around 24 hours and 3 knots, or around 12 hours and 5 knots. So you can go quite far. So if you're worried about running out of fumes, so to speak, or running out of electricity, it's just a matter of just taking down the speed of the boat, and you can pretty much reach whatever your desire is within reason. So for us, now that I have 2 years of experience, we're not really worried about running out. It's just a matter of planning it. There's happened a lot on the battery side the past 10 years. The batteries are, in general, the energy density has come down from around 200 watt hours per kilo to around 270 watt hours per kilo. So on that side, it hasn't happened a lot, as much as people maybe think. So it's incremental changes as we go along on the energy density. What has really changed is the prices and the way we pack the batteries. And that's been an enormous change the past 10 years. Going forward, I think we'll see somewhat of the same on the energy density. So perhaps an average around 5% a year, something like that. And also what we see with batteries that's getting packed today is that they are increasingly better and easier to recycle. So the batteries that we have and the arrangements that we have in Norway is that we do second life for batteries towards with partners, so that can go to cabins or houses where you don't have that extreme power output. And after second life, on top of that, you have the possibility to recycle the batteries. Today with our partners, they say that they can recycle between 80 to 90%, so it's pretty good. For us, of course, we have very low volumes, and the batteries for marine use are quite expensive. The initial cost, or the capital cost, is higher than what you have for the gasoline or the diesel. But we see with a lot of our customers, or most of our customers, they are commercial users, so they use their boats for fish farming, tourists, port and harbor, police, government, a lot of those things. And when they have everything from 500 to 1,000 to 2,000 run time hours per year, they typically have a pretty good ROI. So our customers today usually have less than 5 years ROI, some down to 1 year return on investment. So it's getting pretty good. For the private market, it's of course a bit expensive, and maybe not so many that use the boat for 50 to 100 hours per year would evaluate to go for electric quite yet. But hey, if you can afford a yacht or something like that, why not have something electric behind? So this will come gradually, and as the volumes grow, as the battery prices come down, it will gradually open for more and more people. And Amsterdam, we know in Paris, and Norway has it. We know that the US is actually looking at it, and who knows, maybe even Australia could come along and help the industry along a little bit, which of course would make it accelerate quite fast. So we have a few customer votes in the market, in addition to our own. So as an example, we can use one of the fish farmers that we've delivered to. So what they see, they have 8 meter 60 boat. It's built in HDPE. And the weight of the boat is a few hundred kilos heavier than the one that they would have with the diesel, because they had the first generations of batteries. With the second generation of batteries, the weight would actually be the same as the diesel equivalent that they would have used. This boat has around 15 to 20 nautical mile range. With the new batteries, you can add 5 to that. And they use their boat between 500 and 1,000 hours per year. And with that, they cut, with the Norwegian grid footprint, they cut around, let's see, that should be between 40 to 60 tons CO2 per year. In Norway, the average for a normal car is around 2 tons per year, so they cut the equivalent of so 15 to 20 to 30 cars per year. So we think that's pretty good. When it comes to cost, it's highly dependent on the cost in the different countries. So some have really high cost for gasoline and diesel. Everyone thinks they have high, but Norway has really high. And of course the energy prices. So that varies a lot actually. In Norway we have, because there's close to no maintenance, or there is not really any maintenance, we recommend you change the cooling liquid every 2nd year, and that's pretty much it. Altogether in Norway we're talking about around 80% saving on the operational cost, including less maintenance or no maintenance, and then of course the usage of the energy. So yeah, it's getting pretty good. Thanks for the great questions. It's really interesting to hear all of the thoughts and what people are interested in, also from Australia. We have tons of interest from there, and I hope that it won't take too long before we can also help Australia's got emissions and have that fantastic feeling of just going quiet. It's just a different experience, it's a different world, going on the water without the sound. And like our first customer said earlier, they said it's just it's a different feeling. You feel so much better, and I think that's what we really want to bring into the world and to the customers. Just getting that same feeling that we have using the systems. It's just it's already nice to be on the water, but this is just a new level of experience. So I hope that we can bring it to Australia too.
Who wants that experience? Who doesn't want that experience? Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Leif. Remotely, he may be on YouTube up in the early hours of the morning. Thank you so much for bringing your energy to the room. We've had some great questions. It's been great to showcase some of these, some of this tech. And also, could you please put your hands together? Warm thank you to Frank Hobson and to Aaron Smith, all the way from Perth, for being here. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, this is just the beginning of our workshop series as part of the Whitsunday Healthy Heart project in coordination or partnership with the Coral Sea Academy. So keep your eyes posted to our Facebook page, the Climate Hub, to the local media outlets where we'll be promoting upcoming workshops. So we'd love to be able to see you along to our next one. I don't know what that will be yet, but it's sure to be a great topic early next year. We will be sending out a feedback form to all of our attendees this morning. So if you could please take the time when you get home, back to work, to fill out the feedback form, we'd really appreciate it. I promise it won't be a long one. So once again, thank you very much for attending, and we'll be around for the next half an hour or so. If you've got any questions about for the speakers or for ourselves, we're more than happy to hang around and answer those. So thank you, everybody. Thanks, Olivia.